Okay, great. I think it's time, and I didn't forget to restart the recording. Perfect. So, as I was telling you just before the break, I present the work of Thanos from what he did during his independent remote mapping project so this academic year. It was during the first term this year. So Thanos is in this field picture that we took. Last Friday? So last Friday with the year 3 students, we were able to do a field day with Matt and Alex. We were near the Bristol area, and so some of the year 3 students were able to join us. And Thanos is a student with the yellow hard hat that you can see there. And as I said also at the beginning, so this will be the work of Thanos, but most of the year 3 students, they have done the same sort of work. So they all mapped the same area, which will be in the Kalpin fold and thrust belt. You'll see that. And they all use sort of the same method. Yeah, but I asked Thanos because he gets the best mark to this independent project and was a way to sort of congratulate him. And unfortunately, he's feeling really, really too unwell to do that. So, introduction to the Tarim Basin. So the Tarim Basin is located on the ancient Silk Road, and it is a large and arid basin located in northwest China, just there. And it's situated between the Pamir Arc and the Kunlun Mountains to the south and the Tian Shan Mountains to the north. The Tarim Basin is the driest place in Eurasia, as you can see, with a big Taklamakan desert that is called a place of no return, just to give you an idea of the climate there. Ephemeral rivers fed by snow melt from the surrounding mountains, as you can see on the satellite images here, are present, but due to ground sapping and high rates of evaporation, they never reach a standing body of water, making Tarim a non-doric basin. A key component of the Central Asian orogenic belt is the Tarim Craton. And the Tarim Craton is composed of Archean early Neoproterozoic basement gneisses overlain by a thick cover of middle Neoproterozoic to Quaternary age. So this is an unmetamorphosed cover, and it includes siliciclastic sediments, carbonates, and intrusive and extrusive igneous rock. So the Tarim Basin is really a rigid craton that is surrounded, as you can see on this diagram, by many microcontinents and other cratons. So the Kalpin fold and thrust belt is a region of significant Cenozoic uplift in the northwest periphery of the Tarim Basin. So you can see the Kalpin fold and thrust belt on this diagram here. And it has been initiated by the significant Cenozoic uplift has been initiated by the far field effect of the Himalayan orogeny. Previous studies have found that the exposed stratigraphy contains one of the most complete sections of the Paleozoic in Asia, and that these rocks also record a really complex tectonic history. The remote mapping project that the students have done and Thanos has done focuses on this red rectangle here, on this area, and what is called the Aksu reentrant, where the fold and thrust belts deflect north and terminate in the area around the city of Kalpin that is just there. So a bit about quickly the method, because I think for, let's say, most of us, doing a remote independent mapping project was a really, really vague notion before the COVID-19 pandemic. So what really has the student done? So mostly, this project was conducted through the analysis of remotely sensed data products, as you can see on this diagram here, including sort of multispectral orbital images. They also made a study using Google Earth satellite images because the area is unvegetated. It's a desert. I mean, the geology is really, really well exposed on satellite images. They also used field photograph from the literature. So they tried to combine, if you want, the students really tried to combine everything that was available remotely to study the rock in, I would say, exactly the same way, not exactly the same way, of course, it's not possible, but in a way as close as possible to describe the rock as close as possible as if they were really in the field. And they did exactly the same job. They made observations of the rock, they described the rock, and they interpreted what they saw. And did exactly the same thing also with tectonic structures. Yeah. So when Mark Sutton was telling at the beginning of this event that the student has been able to achieve the same learning objective and develop the same mapping skills as if you had done an outdoor, let's say, a more normal independent project, this is completely true. So students you can see a picture here of all the localities that Thanos has visited, not all, but some of the localities that Thanos has visited. And the students took notes in their field notebook in exactly the same way as they would be doing in outdoor field work. And then they created, so the main aim of an independent mapping project is to map an area and to produce the geological maps and cross sections. So it's what they've done. And they produce the geological maps on using ArcGIS, ArcMap, and Inkscapes. So here I directly jump into the final geological map that Thanos has made, just to give you an idea of what the students have been able to do. Clearly, because I also marked some of the project, I can tell you that not all the maps were the same. Clearly, there were some significant differences in the geological maps from looking to the work of different students. So just telling you that it was not easier to do a remote independent mapping project than a normal one. Yeah. So they produced geological maps. They looked, so here is just to show you typically what they were able to see on satellite images. And they also, as I was telling you, they also studied the deformation of this area. So here are some truncated folds and thrusts that we will see just after that. Here is one of the interpretation sketch of Thanos about the geology of this area. And of course, they also use stereonet analysis to support not to support, but to study the area. So here, Thanos was able to describe two main deformation events in the mapping area. D1, I quickly say it, and then we will see that a bit later, but D1 was a compressional stress regime. Sigma 1, as you can see here, was oriented north, northeast, south, southwest in this D1 phase of deformation. And the south-southwest dipping and east-west trending reverse fault led to progressive uplifting and exposure of older stratigraphy to the north. Yeah, so this is part of Thanos' interpretation of the deformation. And this deformation is referred to the Aksu uplift in the area. While the second phase of deformation that Thanos has been able to describe in the mapping area here, D2, was also a compressional tectonic regime, but with a northeast-southwest orientation of sigma 1. And it is characterized by major imbricate thrust fault and fault propagation folding. And as you can see from the orientation of sigma 1, the structures that were creating during D2 are nearly perpendicular to those from D1. And these are the cross sections that Thanos has made. So if I just come back to the geological map, I think it is cross-section A and B. So along these two transects here, broadly oriented north-south, or let's say north-northwest and south-southeast. And just go quickly, because then most of the presentation will be about the geological history that happened over the area, at least Thanos' interpretation of the geological history of the Earth. But just to show you really the idea of this talk today is to give you a good idea of what the students were able to do remotely during their independent mapping project. Again, looking to different works, clearly the cross sections were different. Okay, so let's have a look now to the geological history of the Kalpin region, and or let's say Thanos' interpretation of the Kalpin's geological history based on his observation and the literature reviews that he has done. This is something figures out Thanos' own, except where stated otherwise. So I think Thanos added that after one of my comments when he sent me the slides, that really to tell that all the block diagrams that you will see have been created by Thanos. He really did an amazing job, an amazing work on constructing these diagrams. So let's start with the Neoproterozoic and Tonian. So the geological record of the mapping area begins in the middle Neoproterozoic, with the Tarim block likely on here, the peripheral north margin of Rodinia. The tectonic setting was probably an arc margin here, as indicated by the presence of some blushes. Two main units were deposited at that time in this setting, the Aksu group and the Kiawen-Brak group. Sorry for my pronunciation of most of the formations that we will see today. Most of them, I'm just seeing them for the first time. So the Aksu group represents accretionary wedge sediments that were metamorphosed to bluish grades during subduction, of course, whereas the unmetamorphosed Kiawen-Brak group is comprised of abyssal sediments deposited in a fore-arc or back-arc basin. So again, all this interpretation comes from Thanos' observation. A significant unconformity followed, over which the Kiawen-Brak group was lithified, uplifted, and tilted. So this uplift may reflect the formation of an Andean-style margin to the north of the mapping area during the early to middle Cryogenian. So during the late Cryogenian, the Marinoan glaciation, this mountain range may have hosted a large ice sheet which fed southwards flowing glaciers into the mapping area. So this resulted in the deposition of subglacial tillits and ice proximal proglacial lake sediments of the Uermainak formation. Just to be clear, what I mostly do myself as Valentin is taking some notes from Thanos' work and just telling them. So sorry if it looks like a bit like I'm reading something, because clearly I am reading notes. Yeah, so just a message about the illustrative block diagrams. They are colored by period and following the same colors that Thanos has chosen for the geological map. Following this, a phase of rifting occurred. So lithospheric thinning resulted in significant subsidence and the opening of one or more rift basins between normal faults. Within this, the fluvial lacustrine Sugaite-Bulake formation was deposited. This one here, Sugaite-Bulake. Coeval with an episode of tholeiitic magmatism likely associated with a rift development. The climax of rifting is likely marked by the transition from the Sugaite-Bulake formation to the marine Kege-Bulake formation. The significance of this phase of rifting is quite debated in the literature. Apparently, I'm not an expert, but it has been suggested that it could correspond to the separation of the Tarim from Gondwana, the Tarim Basin from Gondwana. Although other works have argued the separation of the two did not occur until really later in the geological history, probably with some suggestions dates around 700 million years to in between 400 million years. after that, a regression in the Kegebulake formation reflects a transition to shallow marine deposition. This marks the beginning of a new phase of the mapping area's evolution, which is a prolonged period of carbonate deposition in a shallow epicontinental tropical sea, defined by steady post-reef subsidence rates and the lack of tectonicism or magmatism in the mapping area. So the formations deposited in that phase are dominated by carbonates and typically dolomites and limestone. And gradual shallowing trends throughout the Cambrian, culminating in the supraparietal facies of the Awatage formation, could reflect progressive filling of the marine basin due to sedimentation rate exceeding subsidence rate. Inversely, a deepening trend occurs from the early to middle Ordovician, accompanied by an increase in tectonic subsidence. So this has been suggested to signal the collision of the Yichieke arc with South Tarim. So as Thanos said, it begins to get tectonically interesting at that time in the Ordovician. A regional unconformity with significant topography exists at the end of this phase, and which may reflect a period of subaerial exposure caused by a significant drop in global sea levels during the late Ordovician glaciation. And during this interval, the Kudi terrain collided with South Tarim. So here, just to show you what the students were able to do. So typically observing some rocks and constructing some sedimentary logs, describing the outcrops, describing the different units and formation, and making interpretations on them. And here is sort of a summary of this first mega sequence of deposition in the mapping area, with the deposition of subglacial tillits and ice proximal proglacial lake sediments in the Cryogenian, deposition of sediments that transit from fluvial siliciclastic to lacustrine shallow marine carbonates in the Ediacaran, and in the Cambrian, it was mostly carbonate deposition continues in a shallow tropical epicontinental sea, just what I presented you before. Then after that, there was deposition of a second, what Thanos called Megasequence. So from the middle Silurian to the middle Devonian, the Siluro-Devonian megasequence consists of siltstones that reflect a clastic marine foreshore setting that is called the Kalpin Dage Formation, and which grading conformably into mud-rich fluvial terrestrial sandstones and siltstones, which are called, not sure that I can pronounce this formation, the Tatayer Taje and the Yimungantawu formations. Hope that's correct and not too bad. So this regression represented a change from moderate subsidence rates potentially associated with the Kudi orogeny to lower subsidence rates and subsequent overfilling of the basin. Conformably overlying those formations that we just seen is the lagunal and fluvial Kerziete formation, which was accompanied by an increase in subsidence rates potentially attributable to the collision of the Kunlun terrain. By the Silurian, shared shelly fauna suggests that the Tarim block, and by the Tarim block I mean the mapping area, at least Thanos means the mapping area, was likely in close proximity with the other Chinese block. Here again, just an example of here the Silurian and Devonian deposits with the different formation. And finally, the collision between the Tarim block and the Yili Central Tian-Shan terrain in the late Carboniferous resulted in the closure of the South Tian-Shan Ocean and the amalgamation of Tarim with South Eurasia, as you can see on the block diagrams represented here. So this collision was prolonged and proximal to the mapping area. And following this collision, the North Tarim region became a foreland basin due to a flexural subsidence of the elastic lithosphere under the load of the newly formed TIEN mountain range. This explains why the Carboniferous succession is just over 100 meters thick across the central part of the mapping area, but rapidly thickens to more than 1.5 kilometers in thickness in the northeast section of the mapping area, which is the most proximal to the TIEN mountain range and so was part of the foredip. All across the mapping area, the environment of deposition transitioned from a marine setting in the late Carboniferous to a semi-arid fluvial setting in the early Permian. This likely reflects an overfilling of the basin. Again, the same thing. So here, in the early Permian, a mantle plume affected the area. And that forms the Tarim large igneous province. I think I have a picture of this large igneous province, and you can see that the mapping location here is within mostly basaltic rock dominant within this area. So this includes, so the Tarim large igneous province included a radial dike swarm and eruptions of flowed basalt, both of which reached in the mapping area as we just seen. The dike swarm includes sills and dikes that have a northwest-southeast orientation in the mapping area, while the flowed basalt eruptions occur in two discrete pulses that are dated approximately at 290 million years. Three Gondwana-derived terrains collided with South Tarim in the Mesozoic. So then we just continue this geological history. And in the late Triassic, early Jurassic, the Kyontang block collided with South Eurasia, which resulted in large-scale rapid exhumation and cooling of the Kalpin area, and revived by the collision of the Lhasa block with South Eurasia in the early Cretaceous. So, despite deposition continuing throughout the Mesozoic in most of North Tarim, Mesozoic age rocks are practically absent from the mapping area and the Kalpin uplift region. And this could be due to the Jurassic uplift that left the region as an arid paleoplanation surface, thereby receiving little or no sediments during the Mesozoic era. And the final phase in the tectonostratigraphic evolution of the mapping area was the India-Asia collision, which resulted in the most significant deformation of the mapping area in the Phanerozoic Eon. So deformation first propagated to the mapping area in the late Oligocene or early Miocene. And it is interpreted that this compressional stress regime produced the D1 structures that we have seen at the beginning, with reverse faults uplifting metamorphic basements near the surface, forming the Aksu uplift, perhaps around 30 to 25 million years. This is represented on Thanos block diagram here. So you remember with this, I think it was northeast-southwest orientation of with nearly the same orientation as the relic structures of the Tarim-Eurasia collision, this deformation then propagated northwards and rejuvenated the TIEN mountain range. The subduction of the Tarim craton under the TIEN caused the Paleozoic cover to separate from the basement and thrust basinwards along an evaporate décollement in the middle upper Cambrian wattage formation, forming a thin-skinned fold and thrust belt with imbricate ramps. It's what is represented just there. Deformation generally propagated progressively to the southeast, and these are the D2 structures, and these D2 structures overprinted the pre-existing D1 folds and folds. And the renewed uplift and subsidence in piggyback basins between thrust drove a new episode of sedimentary deposition in the Neogene and Quaternary periods, So these are the alluvial fan and fluvial deposits of the Hattusha and Siyu formations. Depositions continue to the present day, and the Kalpin Tage fault remains seismically active nowadays. So here is mostly Thanos' work, and with a reconstruction of his block diagrams. I'd like to apologize. I don't think that my presentation is really as nice as would have been the one of Thanos, but at least I hope that it reached the objective to give you a good idea of what the students and what Thanos has been able to do during their remote independent mapping project. I am quite afraid that I'll not be able to answer any questions, but luckily we have some students with us together who did practically the same sort of project. So not sure that they'd feel confident to answer any question, but anyway, we can ask. And if you have really questions, you can still send them by email to Thanos. So thank you really much, everyone, for listening, and thank you to have seen Thanos' work. Okay, back.
Thanks, Val. It was nice.
Yeah, what was nice is to see how the students were able to develop these mapping skills, even remotely, which was definitely not something I was 100% sure before to do that, to be honest. But yeah, really. And just for you, Laurent, our students were also able to do virtual mapping in a slightly different way in virtual environments. So what mostly Matt and Mark that are there today did is that to recreate virtual environments, typically in Kinlochleven in Scotland, and the students were able to walk into the virtual environments and to map it in a way that is really, really close to outdoor fieldwork. So this was quite nice also. So I don't know if anyone has a question. Could also be a student. That's completely fine, or not. I did my best. It's a shame. Philippa should have done that. Okay, great. It's what I wanted to do this year for this Celebrating Independent Mapping Project event. Mark, do you want to say a word just so to conclude the event?
Is that me or is Mark Sefton?
No, Mark, you. I think not sure that Mark Sefton is there.
Yes, he may have some college emergency or something.
Yeah.
Well, I just want to say again, thanks everyone for coming, and I think this is a tradition that we'll certainly carry on. Obviously, in next year we should be doing this not remotely, I hope, and we'll be able to have mapping projects up perhaps and look at them and do things in a different way. But I think it was really great to have you, Laurent, as an invited lecturer as well. And I think the idea of the student who does the best project giving the talk is really good, and we should certainly do that again. I wonder if Thanos is really ill, or if he's also worried he can't pronounce the Chinese names and didn't want to embarrass himself.
No. He was really happy to do that, and so disappointed.
Yeah, sure.
That's why he waited the last minute to tell me.
Yeah. No, but anyway, well done for getting through it. It's always difficult giving someone else's presentation at the last minute. So that's been good. It's been really good. It's been really fun. And again, I just want to stress that we all think mapping projects are important. We hope you all enjoyed them and got something out of them. I think probably everyone did, because everyone always does. And if you've done a mapping project, you are now a geologist. Full stop. Welcome to the club. Okay, thank you very much again for organising this. Thanks for turning up.
Thank you.
Bye.